Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Marauders Guild. This is Logan, and this is also behind the scenes of Vader recognizes Leia as his daughter, Altered History series. Now, in this series, we took a look at what would happen if Darth Vader would happen to recognize that Leia Organa was actually Leia Skywalker, the daughter of Anakin and Padme. Now, this was a very special case because this series was actually started 2 years ago. As a matter of fact, I think I actually continued it 2 years to the day of the last entry of that series. So part two is where I left off. Part three or part two. That's before I began the branding of Star Wars Altered History. So there's gonna be a lot to talk about in this behind the scenes edition of Altered History. I'm gonna be talking, of course, about cut ideas, about forgotten ideas in a sense, because in all honesty, there's going to be some of that as well. And then, of course, we're going to be talking about the ending of this particular series and why I chose to end it the way I did, because I know a lot of you are asking about that and wondering about that as well, because the biggest critique I've gotten is this story still feels incomplete. But I'm going to tell you why I feel it is complete and why continuing it would be a whole different situation. So, with that being said, let's dive into it. Let's talk about this series. So, as I said, this series was started 2 years ago. It was back with a what if Vader recognized Leia as his daughter. The reason it was really hard to return to this series, and I talked about it in a previous behind the scenes on the Thrawn series, is I almost didn't want to come back to this series because I just did not know where to take it. That's why I left it originally. And I really should have said something back then as well. I forgot what I wanted to do. People have been clamoring, though. I've gotten so many comments asking continue this particular series that I kind of just gave in. I don't want to say gave in. That sounds pretty bad to say. But I did just throw all the negative thoughts aside of I don't know what to do. I don't know if I continue the series. I was like, I'm going to figure out what I can do because I've written a lot more since then. That was when I was still a freshman in college. Now here I am, a senior, creative writing degree. My writing skills have increased a lot. I'm not trying to brag there, but I am feeling a lot more confident in continuing it. So that's why I took it on. So the thought process was a lot different. Considering that I wrote it 2 years ago, I had completely forgotten where I wanted to take it. The original script for that episode was lost because my notepad where I write all these stories got refreshed on its own at some point. So a lot of my original drafts are gone, lost to the wind, and the only way they exist is through those videos on the channel. So that was a challenge in itself of charting a new course in a sense. But it also helps because now I have not only the previous knowledge, some of that previous knowledge, but I also have the current knowledge of what Star Wars is. And I really want to stress how much I rely on what has happened in Star Wars and influencing what I see and kind of want to have transpire in the stories that I write. A lot of times in this particular series, I kind of pulled inspiration for Vader's motivations from what you saw of him in things like The Force Unleashed. Even in some aspects of the Clone Wars of what you see with Anakin and Padme, I kind of instilled some of that on Darth Vader. So that's where a lot of this inspiration will come from. So I can't really tell you what was my thought process on episodes 1 and 2 because, as I said, that was 2 years ago. So we're gonna start on episode 3, and we're gonna go through here, and I'm gonna point out some Easter eggs, original thoughts, things that I wanted to do. So obviously, coming back episode 3, I had this thought process of, okay, where can I pick up where I left off? I looked back at the original 2 episodes, and I realized, man, I didn't bring in Bail Organa. Bail Organa would be a very key piece to this because that is his daughter. And back then, I kind of had the thought of, well, what can I do else? What else can I add to the story? And then you remember things like, oh, wait, Scarif has just happened. That's going to be weighing on the mind of him as well. But also, he's one of the few chosen people that knows Leia's true ancestry. He knows that Leia's true parents are Padme and Anakin. So much more than just he's going to lose his daughter. He's afraid that Vader is going to recognize that Padme did have her children. And that fear is, okay, what if he finds the other child? But right now he's focusing on Leia. So that's why I said, okay, let's bring in Bail Organa. And I still use Palpatine here and there because I did use him in the first episode. But this particular episode was kind of really me trying to focus more on Bail Organa and introducing him into the story because I hadn't done that beforehand. So I have these instances of him talking to Mon Mothma. I have these instances of him kind of really battling what to do. And that's kind of how this story really begins to take shape. If you ask me, the shape of this story is made in episode 3. 1 and 2 were exposition at best. Episode 3 is where things really begin to take fold, and now we're getting into the meat of this story. We're getting into the real tragedy that can occur if Vader recognizes that Leia is in fact the daughter of Padme and the daughter of, more importantly, of Anakin Skywalker. So while all of that is happening, at the end of that, I have Vader go to Palpatine, and Palpatine tells Vader that they exhumed the body of Senator Amidala, and they had confirmed that she had in fact given birth before death. Vader has this feeling, and I really, whenever this is happening, I write Vader, but in my mind, I kind of see through the transparency of the mask, and I'm writing Anakin's feelings. So every time you hear me say, "Oh, Vader felt this, Vader felt that," if I can put in parentheses, it's really Anakin feels this, Anakin feels that, because I want to have that dual characteristic of the character Darth Vader, where on one side he is the ruthless Sith Lord, but on the inside he's still Anakin Skywalker. And hearing this about Padme is still that Anakin feeling burning within him. He knows that his wife was still alive in that last moment that he saw her, but he didn't do anything. He didn't do anything more. He thought she was gone. So it's very interesting to write about that, and I really did enjoy that. So that was kind of the thought process in episode 3. We move on to episode 4, and that's where things get a bit more important. That's the best way to put it for Vader. Episode 4 is where I wanted Vader to really deal with his past. I have R2-D2 being brought to Darth Vader. I have the message being played of Padme, and then again he sees a lot of Padme within Leia in her movements. He can see that plain as day now, that there's confirmation that Padme did give birth before her death. So now this is the most of Anakin taking over that I could reach in the sense. That's what I really wanted to achieve of Vader's situation here, is this ruthless Sith Lord who now has this shadow coming over him, and that's the shadow of Skywalker. All these things are flooding back to him, seeing R2-D2 again, and really I did that. That's an inspiration done from the comics. If you've seen one of the Star Wars comics done by Marvel, there's a scene in there where Vader sees C-3PO for the first time, since he had obviously become the Sith Lord that we all know him to be. And in that moment, he had a hint of mercy when he saw the droid that he created. So my idea was, well, what would he do if he saw R2-D2? And that's the instance you see here. I know somebody did ask over the course of the series what happened to R2. And if you didn't see that comment, I'm going to say here, R2-D2 in this particular situation was left deactivated. Vader could have had it destroyed, but let's say off scene, he did order the droid just to be deactivated, not destroyed. I kind of wish I put it in there, but the only reason I didn't put it in there because I didn't want R2-D2 to become too big of a thing in this, and I didn't want to have to worry about kind of referencing him back or him being found again. I wanted R2-D2 to be kind of a one thing for Vader had to deal with, kind of how C-3PO was in that comic. Vader sees C-3PO, and then that was kind of it for Vader and C-3PO at that situation. So this also, episode 4 was another important thing because, as I said, I'm trying to bring as much of Anakin's past into Vader's present, and that's where I bring back Obi-Wan Kenobi. He sees the message that Leia Organa would have recorded aboard the Tanae 4 that was meant for Obi-Wan Kenobi. And of course, he hears that name over and over. Rage is burning inside of him. He wants to kill Obi-Wan Kenobi. They're on their way back to Mustafar at this point, but he's like, we have to stop. We have to go back to Tatooine because that's where we caught her, and that means he is there. Now, here's the crazy thing about this. I actually wasn't going to use Obi-Wan at all. The simple reason is I didn't want to, in a weird sense, repeat what I did in my original series, my very first series, which is What If Luke Skywalker did join the Imperial Academy. I didn't want to repeat that because I had a similar situation where Vader found out Obi-Wan was on Tatooine and he wants to go duel him. But I decided to do it because I needed to think, how can I make it different to where, yes, the same situation is happening in a sense, but they're still vastly different. So he sees this message, and I wanted there to be a new layer of it because in the original, when I had Vader go to Tatooine to see Obi-Wan, Obi-Wan didn't know Vader was coming. Vader went there with the full force of the Empire. He had this planet shut down just so he couldn't escape. And in that series, Leia had to find her way to Obi-Wan because she was sent there to find him. So in that, it was a lot more grandeur, I guess you can say, in Vader's search for Obi-Wan. But how could I make it a lot more personal? And that's where I had the instance of Vader reaching out through the Force to see if he can sense Obi-Wan Kenobi. And the more important matter is that not only does he find him, Kenobi in turn feels that dark presence come over him, and he knows who's coming. So now Vader knows who his target is. Kenobi knows Vader is coming. So there is this interesting preparation period, I guess you can say, which is why I have Kenobi decide to leave and walk away as far as possible into the desert, so he can be as far away from Luke at this point. Because Vader doesn't know that he also has a son. He just knows that he has Leia. So he's trying to get as far away from Luke at this instance to make sure that Vader does not sense him or discovers the boy by accident, or even if Luke decided to come visit Obi-Wan out of nowhere, that he isn't there. He's trying to make sure he takes every precaution to deter Vader from finding Luke. And he doesn't know that. More importantly, he doesn't know that Vader even knows Luke exists, because that's why he thinks he's coming and things of that variety. So he's trying to make sure Luke does not get discovered. So Vader does eventually come down to Tatooine. He goes down by himself. Again, that's me trying to make it as personal as possible and different from the first time I did this in the Luke series. In the Luke series, again, like I said, I had him bring the full force of the Empire down, shut down the planet. This time, when they say you want us to bring a shuttle down and things like that, he says no. And he takes his own personal TIE fighter to make sure that he is the only one there. Not even a pilot is to be seen in this situation. It's just going to be Obi-Wan, Darth Vader, in the dark of night on Tatooine. And that's where we kind of build into episode 5. And actually, the inspiration for this fight, and you can kind of tell from the images that I use, is the Maul and Kenobi fight. I really loved how personal that was. Again, it was a situation where they both kind of had feelings that this was about to happen. Maul more so than Kenobi because Maul was trying to make it happen. But it was personal because it was just them two, and with a grandeur, Ezra was sent away in that moment. So it was just Kenobi and Maul. And that's what I wanted for this. Just Kenobi and Vader. Obviously, Vader got the upper hand and defeated Kenobi. Kenobi turned into a Force spirit and disappeared away. Vader had no time to think about it, so he gets into his TIE fighter. At this moment, the rebellion that has now caught wind that Kenobi is on Tatooine, they've sent the Red Squadron down to find him. Vader quickly dispatches of it. And the reason I had this happen is I wanted there to be some kind of action with Vader in that TIE fighter, and that was a way to achieve it. But it was also a fun way to bring in a character you don't really see much. That's Garvin Drace, who's the original Red Leader that you see in Rogue One and Episode 4, respectively. I think a lot of people don't know who that is. I'll even admit that I had to look up his name for confirmation when I was writing this. So I really wanted to bring him into it, have some fun with some characters that you don't normally see. I also had Wedge Antilles there as well. Now, sadly, yes, I did kill them both, but it was fun bringing them out. And again, creating more worry for Bail Organa, because that's why I wanted Bell to be at the highest state of worry heading into what was going to eventually be the Battle of Mustafar. I wanted him to be frightful, to be fearful of what might happen, to closer and closer and closer feel this dread that, my gosh, Vader is going to find out, or Vader already knows, and what is he going to do to her? It becomes less of, my gosh, he has my daughter, and more so, he's going to turn her into a Sith. He's going to turn her into him. So that's the. Every time you go back and see Bale and you see that worry going, know that that's what I wanted him to be affected with. That's what I really felt had to happen with him in this story. So now we move on. Here we are at episode 6. Vader has defeated Kenobi. He didn't learn anything substantial. Let's actually go back for a second to the Kenobi and Vader fight. There's one line that I really enjoyed, and it is of course a reference to Kenobi looking over Luke at this point. And Vader says to Kenobi, "What other secrets are you hiding?" Kenobi looks back at Vader and says, "None that I am willing to share with you." That is a line that can literally mean so many things. It can mean one thing. It can mean a plethora of things. It could be the fact that he's researching the path to, in a sense, eternal life with becoming one with the Force. Of course, he can mean watching over Luke Skywalker. It can mean the location of Yoda. It can mean what actually happened with Padme. It's so many things that he's hiding from Vader in that moment. And Vader is drenched in rage when he says that he's not going to share them with him. And he knows that Kenobi is a resilient person. So torturing him or capturing him to torture him was going to get nothing done. So Vader has no choice but to kill him at that moment. So that's why, if you're wondering why I didn't have Vader try to capture him or get the information out of him, I think we all can agree Kenobi was far more resilient than that. So that's why that had to end that way. So episode 6, Vader has learned nothing. And now he goes back to Leia, tells her, "We're going to Mustafar. That's where I'm going to take you." And he begins to drop these hints of, "Do you know of your mother? What do you know of your early life?" The reason that question is permeated so much is because it's something that I feel would be necessary on Vader's mind. When you find out, when he finds out rather, that he has a daughter, obviously he's gonna wonder how. First question, because as far as he was concerned, Padme was killed by him while she was still with children. There was no way she should have had children. But here's this daughter walking around, splitting image of her in every way almost. How is she here? What happened to my wife? So it's this crazy thing of, what does Vader do now? And then I also had this little interesting note of Leia wondering what's going on, because I need to also dive into her thoughts, because she is the centerpiece of everything that's happening right now. So what is her thoughts through all of this? And that's where I begin to dig into that. And you see her having this battle with herself for a quick second of, why does he keep asking me about my mother? Why does every Imperial that interrogates me ask me about my mother? So she's wondering why she being brought to Mustafar. And she has this quick thought of her birth family, because she knows she's adopted. She knows very little of her mother, and now she's wondering, is her whole family here, and things like that. So it's kind of a sick allusion to what's going to happen. A foreshadowing event of, yes, her birth family technically is there because she's standing in front of her father, and that's where he's going to take her. So that's what I did there. And of course, I had Leia send the transmission to the rebellion that she was being brought to Mustafar. She was captured again, but Vader again ordered that she not be killed because, for obvious reasons, that is his daughter. So now we get to the piece of Les Resistance. I think I said that right. Don't quote me. Here we're at episode 7. Episode 7 is where the battle of Mustafar takes place, and the rebellion does what they can to get Leia back. This episode was really fun to write because it is the biggest episode I've ever written. The biggest battle I've ever written, because I really had a thing of like, oh man, I need to make this huge. So it was the biggest battle I ever written. I had Admiral Akbar rather, I should say, brought in. I had the hugest rebel fleet possible. I could have them amass, get into this battle. Bail Organa's there the whole time, and it was really fun to do that. Write that battle, and then have them go down to the surface. I'll talk about how much I went through to try to make that not only sonically great for all of you, but visually great. Because if you watch it, I did have a lot of moments where I flashed in pieces of battle from the Battle of Endor to act as a visual reference for this battle and the Battle of Scarif as well. But you guys, I went to Battlefront 2 and fired up Battlefront 2 to get some screenshots of soldiers on the ground for you guys for that whole battle sequence. So it was not easy. But let's talk about one of the more important moments that happened right before the Battle of Mustafar takes place, and that is Vader and Leia's discussion, in which Vader does finally reveal to Leia that in fact he is his father. Obviously, it's very clear to where I got that reference. Episode 5, The Empire Strikes Back. I almost had Vader say the exact same line to Leia that he said to Luke in the original film, with the exception of instead of saying "No, I am your father," Adam actually say "Leia, I am your father." And don't get on me because I know a lot of people are like, "That's not what he actually said. He said no." Like things I know, but for the purpose of this, um, I wanted him to say Leia Skywalker because Leia Organa, because saying her name made it more personal, and it just became this thing of what would he say to set it up, you know? So detailing that history that he had with Padme, because it is his daughter. And I feel like the bond between a father and daughter is very different than a bond between father and son. A father, I feel like, at least I would be willing to reveal a lot more about the relationship that you have with your mother, with her mother, as parents and things of that variety, than they would be with a son. So he goes into detail, and it's very strange, but cool, if that makes sense, to write Vader in such a vulnerable way of him explaining now 19 years later the relationship that he had with Padme Amidala, acknowledging the general populations, that being the Jedi and the Republic, how they would have attested this relationship. If anybody found out Anakin was having a relationship with a senator, he'd be ousted from the Jedi Order, and then vice versa for Padme. If she was having an open relationship with the Jedi, she'd be ousted from political circles because she should know Jedi are not supposed to be in a relationship. So why is she willingly in one with the Jedi, and then vice versa for Anakin? Like I said, so for Vader to talk about that 19 years later, I feel like it's very crucial to acknowledge in a sense that he is Anakin in that sense. So that was really fun to write. But then Leia's reaction to it, her being frozen, not knowing what to say. She doesn't say a word after it has been revealed to her. Now, the reason I did that is a stark and drastic change from how she found out in canon. So, in canon, obviously, episode 6, she finds out that Vader is her father. And I feel like at that point, the reason she handled it a lot better is because she has found the connections necessary to not have to, per se, worry about that too much. Obviously, she didn't reveal it to the galaxy, and it wasn't revealed consensually. Someone just shouted it out in the middle of a Galactic Senate meeting, if I'm not mistaken. So, still, it didn't end out great for her when people found out that she was the daughter of Vader. But in this case, she doesn't have Luke Skywalker. She doesn't have Han Solo. She doesn't have all these other people within the rebellion yet, save for her father and her adopted father and someone like Mon Mothma that can tie her down to her light side connections that doesn't make her worry about it. So that's why she's frozen in this moment. So when the rebels finally get down to the ground and try to save her and get her out, she doesn't go. She just says father. That's the first word she says in the time between the battle and her being rescued is father. And Vader cuts down the rebels. And that is, of course, what makes Bail Organa retreat and head off into the galaxy somewhere, remembering that there is another. And then that's where his series ends. So before I talk about that ending, I'm also going to talk about some cut ideas. There's one cut idea that I really didn't do that I kind of wish I did, but in the end, I'm okay I didn't, is the Death Star, obviously. The original story of this, we all know it. Rebels had the plans. Episode 4, they went to destroy the Death Star. The Death Star is still out there. But the reason I didn't use it is because of the importance of the situation. I feel like finding out, if Vader found out that Leia was his daughter, that would overshadow anything having to do with the Death Star. Sure, the Death Star is important, but if you find out Anakin Skywalker had a child, that's going to be vastly more important. So I didn't use the Death Star. I thought about referencing it here and there. I thought about someone walking up to Vader and says, "We still have the Death Star," and then Vader writing it off at the current moment. That's the way I thought about it. But in the end, I just decided not to use it at all. Not necessarily cast it to the side, say it was worthless, but it just wasn't necessary in the moment of what's going on right now. So that's why you don't see much of that. Then there's the Palpatine situation. Palpatine was more of a character in the beginning, and I kind of didn't write him out, but Vader doesn't contact him again. And the reason being for that is I feel like Palpatine's role in this particular portion of the story had been exhausted. He really told Vader, "Hey, you know that she's your daughter. What are you going to do?" And I really thought about after this battle, having Palpatine contact Vader one more time and say, "Bring her to me." But I wanted this to end on a lighter note. And that lighter note is Bail obviously remembering that there is another. The other one is Luke Skywalker. So that's where it ended. And now we're going to talk about that ending. Why it feels incomplete. Now, I understand all of you are saying, hey, there's still so much that can happen. What happens next? I'm going to tell you straightforward why I ended it here. So, the reason why I ended it at that moment is because when I write Altered History series, when I write these things, I tend to write it until the particular story that I'm trying to tell is ended. Think about it like arcs in a sense. So arc 1 is Vader recognizing Leia as his daughter. That particular arc, in my opinion, ended after the Battle of Mustafar. What happens after that is continuing something else. The focus of that story is shifted. When I write past the Battle of Mustafar, that's Vader knows Leia's his daughter. That's not the situation of him recognizing her anymore. That's a whole new arc. That's what does Vader do at that point. That the light side of that story is now Bail is going after Luke Skywalker. That's a whole different story to tell than what happens if Vader recognizes Leia is his daughter. Does that mean I'm not willing to return to it with a sequel or something here and there, like an epilogue maybe, to finish the story? No, I'm not against it at all. But the reason I ended it, again, is because this arc that I'm trying to tell, this story, ends here. If I pick it up again, that's a whole new story. If you get what I'm saying. Like, the title of this whole series, keep in mind, again, is Vader recognizes Leia as his daughter. Battle of Mustafar in this story is it. That's where it's over. This particular story, that the namesake of this story ends there. So that's why I chose to end it where it is. Again, I agree this is incomplete. But what's incomplete is this overarching story. This arc is done. Think of it like a 3-act play or a 3-act movie. This particular portion would be Act 1. Then Act 2 is Bail finding Luke and Vader training Leia, or Leia resisting Vader's training, something like that, and bringing in Palpatine and what he wants to do with Leia. That's Act 2. Could there be an Act 2? Again, like I said, I'm not opposed to doing it, but right now it's not going to happen. I don't want to say it's not going to happen ever. Again, like I said, I'm not opposed to doing it, but we are shifting focuses to the next Altered History series. So that's why. I hope those that wondered why it felt incomplete understand now and can see it being complete. Like I said, I'm not opposed to making a sequel and continuing the story because I did have a lot of fun writing this particular series. So just keep an eye out for that because I probably will update in the future if that ever does come to fruition. But that's going to be a wrap on this particular behind the scenes of Vader recognizes Leia as his daughter. If you guys enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe and ring that bell if you haven't already to get notified about every upload here on the Marauders Guild. And a quick programming note for all of you, Wednesday, I'll be uploading another video revealing which Altered History series won the poll that ended last night at midnight about what the next series will be. And let me tell you guys, I am super excited to reveal it. The running has pretty far at the moment I'm recording this. It was one particular choice leading the pack. And you can go back and look at it yourself. But if you want to save the big reveal for Wednesday, do that. And then Sunday, we'll pick that series up and we'll be off and running with it. So that's going to be about it here. I hope you guys enjoyed this behind the scenes sneak at writing this particular series. And I will definitely see you guys Wednesday for that reveal. And until then, may the force of others be with you.